When I was 12, I was engaged in such worthwhile pursuits as keeping my Tamagotchi pet alive, passing notes to boys who made fart jokes, and trading lip smackers with my other idiot friends. When Chandra Oppenheim was 12, she was fronting a post-punk band in downtown New York, performing for a who's who of the early 80s art world. The New York Times wrote, Chandra is a cool, self-possessed girl who epitomizes New York precocity. No bouncing nymphette she. 40 years later, still cool and self-possessed, she is reviving a career that was put on hold so she could focus on algebra and Latin homework. And now her daughter, age 12, is getting in on the act too. Today we welcome former Brooklynite Chandra Oppenheim. Welcome to Woman 2BK.
Thank you.
And her daughter, Isa Oppenheim Pressman. Thanks so much for joining us, Isa.
Yeah.
So, Chandra, tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in your households in New York in the early 80s.
Well, I had two households. My dad was in Tribeca, and my mom was right around the corner here in downtown Brooklyn. And so they were kind of almost like a split personality. So in a way that, really what that gave me is the best of both worlds. I had this crazy, fun time at my dad's, and I had a very stable, secure place at my mom's.
And your dad, Dennis Oppenheim, was an artist. And in his obituary, the New York Times described him as an athletic, ruggedly handsome man who maintained a shock of blonde hair longer than seemed biologically possible. So will you tell me a little bit about him and his art and how you intersected with his art as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, he did maintain, now as I'm getting older, I look back and I say, wow, he really did have a lot of energy and youthfulness about him, and was working all the time. He was so prolific, and his mind was constantly going and pumping out these crazy machines, and that's a whole other story trying to describe his work.
I know that you collaborated with him.
Yeah, by the time I was 7, I was starting to write my own pieces, and he was there as a sounding board and as almost more like a peer in terms of the creation of the work. And I could talk with him about my ideas, and he was very encouraging. And then I did my first performance art piece when I was 7, and it was around that time that I did a piece opening for Laurie Anderson.
Tell me a little bit about, so you started creating music with this band, The Dance, and you released an album with them. Tell me about that album.
Well, it was an EP that we started working together when I was about 9.
And these were adult humans.
That's right.
Okay.
They were all,
So were
all adults. Yes, they were all adults. So there were my two songwriting collaborators were Eugenie Desario and Stephen Alexander. And so they were the people who were friends of my dad's, and that's how I got connected with the Dance being my backing band, because that was their band.
Did they reach out to you? Like, why did they want to work with a 9-year-old?
I think they wanted a second project. I always thought that they wanted specifically to work with a young person, but I found out more recently that they were simply looking for another project, and somehow I guess they were talking with my dad about that, and I think I had already started writing songs, so they thought, well, let's get together, try out a rehearsal. And it went so well that we continued, and then we worked together to develop, maybe about 6 or 7 songs, and then picked 4 to do the EP.
And where would you draw inspiration for your lyrics?
Yeah, directly from whatever I was going through as I was about to enter middle school, basically. So. School relationships, that kind of thing, friendships. And then a big piece of it, though, I think, again, going back to my father's aesthetic and influence on my work, things having to do with, I know one of the words that's mentioned a lot in reviews and such are paranoia. And I do feel like, especially, growing up as being a girl, in New York in the 70s, you had to have eyes on the back of your head to be safe. There were all kinds of things that I was taught to do to be safe. So it was on my mind every time I stepped out the door. So there's that fear element, and then my dad was also interested in psychology. So I think there were elements having to do with losing your mind or someone else taking over your mind, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. There's a song that's basically about stranger danger.
That's right. It is. That's definitely one of my favorite songs.
I love that song too. And
good.
also it both strikes me on several different levels. One is that it could be a child, a young person talking about, like, you know, my parents told me never to talk to strangers, like, don't get in the van.
Yeah.
And then also, yes, these threads of like a young girl who's becoming a woman in New York, and kind of like, you know, a gritty time. And then I think, you know, if you didn't know that an 11-year-old wrote it, you could also take it, you know, on a different, more philosophical level as well. But I love that so many of the lyrics kind of operate on multiple planes.
Yes.
You have another song that I love, and I know many people do as well, called Kate.
Yes.
And the opening lyrics are, there's a girl named Kate, and she thinks she's really great, but she's not, which is definitely something that I wrote in my own diary when I was in 7th grade. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about that song and about the inspiration for it.
Sure. Well, I mean, really that came from, simply put, jealousy. So there was a girl who I went to school with named Kate. And I think a lot of my focus would go to her because of my own insecurities, or just feeling like, gee, I wish people were paying more attention to me. And so I would then become kind of resentful, but it was somehow her fault.
And you write about how, you know, she's blonde, and you know, people are paying attention to her because she's blonde, and but also you can sense that there is that that push pull of like envy, but also like maybe be my friends. You know,
definitely.
That you get
and
at
we
that
were
age.
friends too, so there is that element. I mean, so there is some character in this. It's not me purely as myself. I'm exaggerating things and trying to, in the songwriting, take things on these tangents, kind of, from where I might actually feel. But then there was the other element of it too, which is that I also felt compassion for her for getting that attention, because maybe she didn't want that, or didn't want the attention in the way she was getting it. And
there's a lot of very precocious gender stuff, I find, you know, an acknowledgement of jealousy that she's getting attention, but then also being able to put yourself in your shoes and being like, oh, wait, maybe that sucks for her too. Issa, where do you pull your inspiration for the lyrics that you write? From similar places as your mom?
Usually like just from my school experience. I write a lot of songs about friends and enemies, and that's basically what I write about.
Sounds similar to the Kate situation. Would you be, I mean, if you've performed, or if you were to perform a song about a friend or an enemy at school, would you be concerned about how they would receive it at all?
I think that the people I write those songs about would be just too self-centered to know that that song is about them,
right? Unless
their name was actually in it. And honestly, I don't know how, like, well, I think, like, they'd probably be upset with me. But I don't really care.
Well, it sounds like maybe you use more like coded language than your mom. I mean, calling the song Kate was pretty bold. Like, I'll bet you think the song is about you, Kate. So tell me, so you wrote these songs, you released the EP, and then you started performing.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, our first show was at the Mud Club, which was actually practically in the same building as where my father's loft was. And I remember that for that first show feeling very nervous, but by the time we were about at our third song, it was my favorite place to be ever in life. And
What did you
Yeah.
like about it?
I think when I'm on stage singing, it's what, people talk about being in the zone. I'm so relaxed and comfortable and focused, and everything makes sense.
And were the people coming to see you your peers? Were they
No,
adults?
They wouldn't have been able to get in.
Right.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
IDs.
Yeah, right.
What did that feel
Yeah.
like being, the only preteen?
Well, I was very accustomed to being with only adults, because that was, well, first of all, I have half siblings, but they grew up out west. So at that time, I was an only child. And so in both of my households, I was surrounded by adults. So
Did
I
you
was used to
ever
that.
perform for an audience of your peers, like not at the Mud Club, but at an all ages venue, or was it always?
No, I don't even know if there really were. I remember there was an all ages disco, being the 70s.
Sure, but you weren't exactly doing that type of music.
No. So no, I don't think there was an opportunity to do it. There was one show that we did at the Peppermint Lounge, and I was allowed to invite a bunch of friends.
And then a little bit later, you did have a band where other teenagers were backing
That's
you up,
right.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
What was that decision to do that, and how did that differ?
Well, a lot of decisions were made by the adults in my life, so I'm not sure exactly how that was, but I think because I was, by then I was about 12 or 13 or so, I guess they liked the idea of having everyone be around that age, just for fun, I guess. And probably, I'm guessing the dance probably wanted to move on and not be the backing band anymore and focus on what they were doing. Yeah.
Issa, what do you think about the music that your mom wrote and performed when she was your age?
I think it's really cool, and I really enjoy singing it, and I really like listening to it.
What type of music do you listen to today?
Well, I usually just listen to the radio, and I really like Halsey.
I feel like there's often this talking down to children of a certain age, right? Between the ages of like maybe
Yes.
10 and 14, where it's like, oh, teeny bopper is like this pejorative term, and we're going to feed them like Disney Channel stars, and that they don't have like a sophisticated musical palette. What do you think of that? I mean, clearly you were listening to what the adults in your life were listening
Yes.
to.
Our
taste.
culture is in general dismissive of young people, people's ideas and abilities, and what they have, their opinions about the world around them.
I mean, what you were doing was actually very radical, right? It was putting a young woman front and center and saying that what she's writing about, her ideas, her lived experience, is valid and worth paying attention to. You're still, you recently, you took a break. You took a long break.
Well, sort of. I just took a break from those songs.
Yes, you took a break from those songs, but now you're performing those songs
That's right.
again.
Now, yes, that's right.
What is it like revisiting that material?
Well, I do feel like as performing them, that they do hold up. I mean, that kind of like what you were saying about how they're multi-layered and they can speak to any age group. Just because I wrote them when I was a kid didn't mean that they were geared towards children. It applies to any human. in a certain way. There's it isn't limited. It isn't, like a nursery rhyme or something like that. So it's very easy for me to tune right back into the feeling of it and the message of it, because I can identify with it even now.
Is there a song off Transportation that means something different to you today, or deeper, or where you view it a totally different way than when you wrote it?
Well, so there were the second set of songs that we recorded in 1982 that weren't on the original Transportation, but are now part of that package. And there's one called Get It Out of Your System. And that is all about time travel, time warps, thinking about the kind of envisioning the future and the perspective of a lifetime and that kind of thing, but written by an 11-year-old. But when I sing that, it's like my 11-year-old self is speaking to my present-day self.
Oh, that's so eerie.
It is.
And Issa, you perform sometimes with your mom as well. Are there any songs that you in particular like singing off the Transportation album?
I really like singing Concentration because I feel like the message is kind of about taking over somebody's mind, and it's fun for me to embody that character on stage.
When you embody the character, do you think of embodying your mom at your age, or what is that character that you're projecting?
It's kind of just like a person that's in a zone, like just, it's relaxed, but very serious. I can say what I want, and you can't stop me. Even if it starts a catastrophe, I don't care. 'Cause in case you didn't gather, chaos is what I live for. Do you want to be a dictator? Do you want to be a manipulator? I'm gonna need my defibrillators. You're killing me, killing me. Why can't you understand? She's the angel, you're the devil, and I'm complicated. So there, take that. Turn round and look at me. Rook took your king, checkmate. Knocked down to the ground. White flag waving, angels clapping, I win.
Thank you, Issa. I loved that.
Thanks.
So do you also write music, or do you have, do you work with friends who write the music to your lyrics, or?
Well, I write my own music. I tried writing a song with some friends, and it's just really difficult for me to work with other people because I have so many ideas, and it's really hard. So now I just write songs on my own.
Chandra, any advice to young people out there today who might want to be sharing their songs or their lyrics?
I think really letting things flow out and turning off that inner critic and letting it really be how it is naturally as it comes out, and that's where I think you can find the gems. If you're rather than thinking, oh, I want to write something that I think this person's going to like, or oh, that just constantly critiquing so that nothing can actually get out on the page. So move that aside and turn that part of your brain off and get a pen and a piece of paper and write what you want to say.
And I think that's something that young women often struggle with, is self-critique, self-censoring. Is this good enough? So thank you both for being tremendous role models. And Transportation has been re-released, and you can find it in record stores. Thank you both so much for coming on the show. Chandra, Issa.
Thank you.
Thank you.